Welcome to the channel Optimystery. Today we want to tell you some interesting facts. Hopefully viewing will be not only interesting, but also useful. Man is always attracted, but at the same time frightening, that is not submitted to an explanation if before everything could be written off to the lack of technology that prevents modern detectives, investigator, and historians to find answers to the riddles that continue to torment the minds of millions of people around the world. That it is a coincidence of coincidence, or the intervention of otherworldly forces. Reality is sometimes scarier than the creepiest horror movie, whether it is a sudden disappearance, kidnapping, unsolved murders and suicides, or unidentified lights in the night sky. There are many more mysteries that cannot be explained. Here we decided to share with you a variety of mysteries of the world that are still unsolved by science so far. Mysterious letters. Circleville in 1976. Residents of the small town of Circleville near Columbus, Ohio, began to receive ominous handwritten letters in block letters. Each message contained secret details of the personal lives of the recipients. One townswoman, Mary Gillespie, received a mass of letters accusing her of having an extramarital affair, with the author warning the girl that he was closely monitoring her home and all her activities. After a while, messages began to come, and Mary's husband. For a while, the process stopped and read Gillespie and seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, until one day in 1977, Mary's husband was found dead in his car after he received a phone call from someone who, in his opinion, was the author of the letters. His death was ruled an accident, but in the meantime, Mary continued to be harassed, still receiving letters and threatening road signs. In 1983, Mary tried to remove one of them and ran into a trap, a box with a gun that was supposed to automatically shoot anyone who opened it. Luckily, Mary opened it, so the gun didn't go off, so she wasn't hurt. After a lengthy investigation, Mary's brother-in-law was accused of the crime and sentenced to 25 years in prison. However, the letter attack did not stop during his incarceration, with hundreds of residents receiving threatening messages until 1994. Disappearance of the transport ship Cyclops. On February 16, 1918, the ship left Rio de Janeiro with 306 crew members and passengers aboard. And headed for Baltimore, Maryland, the ship was carrying manganese ore and was believed to have been overloaded 100 tons over capacity. The transport ship made an unscheduled stop in Barbados. And on March 4th, it continued its journey to Baltimore. It was scheduled to arrive on March 13th, but the Cyclops never made it to its final destination, and the wreckage and bodies of the crew members were never found. Some believe the ship was lost in the Bermuda Triangle. The mysterious disappearance and appearance of Lawrence Joseph Bader. In 1957, kitchenware salesman Lawrence Joseph Bader, who was facing a series of financial problems, missing while fishing near his home in Akron, Ohio, was a storm that damaged his boat. 4 days after the disappearance in Omaha, Nebraska, appeared John Fritz Johnson, who was a colorful personality and became something of a local celebrity. In 1965, when Fritz was in Chicago, one of the residents of Akron recognized him as Lawrence, and even brought the niece of the missing salesman, who was able to identify him. They had a long argument with Fritz. His identity he denied. Fritz's fingerprints matched those of Lawrence Bader, but Johnson continued to insist that he had absolutely no memory of his life in Akron. He was even examined by psychiatrists who concluded that he was not lying. Fritz died in 1966, taking the whole truth to the grave. Toxic Woman's strange story happened in February 1994, when Gloria Ramirez was urgently hospitalized in the emergency room of California. The woman was suffering from actively developing cervical cancer. Witnesses noted that when at 2015 Ramirez appeared at the hospital, she was extremely confused, and her body was covered with oil stains. A few minutes after the start of treatment, medical staff felt bad and lost consciousness in the intensive care unit, rushed and other medics. But they soon became unwell after 45 minutes of cardiopulmonary resuscitation and defibrillation. Ramirez was pronounced dead, and 23 medical personnel experienced health problems. 5 of them were hospitalized, and a medical resident even had to spend 2 weeks in the intensive care unit. The county health department believed that the hospital staff suffered from mass hysteria, but the medical staff fundamentally disagrees with his opinion. All possible theories have not been scientifically supported, so the mystery of the so-called toxic woman remains unsolved today. The Oklahoma City terrorist attack and the missing leg on April 19, 1995, a booby-trapped truck exploded near the federal building in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, killing 168 people. Investigators working on the case found a foot in a military boot, but the woman they believed the limb belonged to Lakeisha Levy had 2 feet. Levy's body was exhumed, and the foot was taken for research because the limb was embalmed. To make DNA analysis was impossible, so it is still unknown to whom exactly belonged to the foot. An unusual finding caused suspicions about the existence of another terrorist or another victim, but none of the assumptions have not been confirmed. The murder of the Miyazawa family on New Year's Eve 2001. The bodies of Mickey and Isuk. Miyazawa and their 2 young children were found in a small house in a Tokyo suburb. During the investigation, detectives found that the killer had been in the family home for several hours. He used a computer, ate fruit and ice cream, and treated the wounds with medicines from the family medicine cabinet. He even used the toilet and did not flush anything. The strangest thing about this case is that despite the presence of physical evidence that could help identify the killer, such as clothes left in the house, the police have not been able to identify and apprehend the culprit. Missing lighthouse keepers from the island of Flannan, there is little more terrifying than a lonely lighthouse remote from civilization, and it is just the right place for a spooky mystery. People sometimes disappear, but when they disappear without a trace, without leaving any trace or even a hint of the reason, then a new legend and mystical story is born. It rages the passions of some inordinate forces and necessarily present version of aliens. The mysterious story of similar disappearance of 3 lighthouse keepers from the islands of Flannan is about it. This story has all the trappings of a mystery: stopped clocks, untouched dinners, no traces of blood. In 1900, people arriving on the Helen Moor part of the Flannan Islands in Scotland expected to meet experienced lighthouse keepers, Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, and Donald MacArthur. However, the men were nowhere to be seen. They seemed to have simply vanished without leaving any trace. Inside the lighthouse, a chair was found overturned. The table was set, the food untouched, the clock was not working. The ship's log showed that there had been a terrible storm on the island. Although nothing was reported about this anywhere in the area, the logical conclusion was that the watchmen had been carried away by the sea while engaged in their duties under harsh conditions. But whether this was so, there are other more frightening versions of unnatural forces. Some people claim that Ellen Moore has some kind of negative aura that makes people behave inappropriately. Lack of concrete answers helps to build a lot of mystical versions and generates more questions than answers. Disappearance of the Soder children in the middle of the night on Christmas Eve 1945. The Soder family had a disaster. Their house burned down. George and Janie Soder and 9 of their 10 children were inside at the time of the fire. The eldest was not present. He was in town. 4 managed to get out safely, along with their parents. However, the bodies of the other 5 were never found, causing the Soders to suspect that the fire was caused by arson, and the children were kidnapped. George was an Italian immigrant who often had harsh words for Mussolini, which suggested that the children had been kidnapped by the Sicilian mafia. The Soders traveled all over the United States trying to track down their children through eyewitness reports and observations. In 1967, Jenny received an envelope inside which she found a photograph of a young man who looked very much like her grown son, Louis. On the back of the envelope was written, "Louis Soder. I love my brother Frankie." The letter had no return address, and the family never managed to find the man in the photograph, both parents continuing to search for their children until their deaths. The Traum family's bizarre journey. One Monday morning in 2016, Mark and Jacoba Traum, with their 3 adult children, Rihanna, Mitchell, and Ella, left their home and berry farm in Victoria, Australia. When police searched their home a few days later, they found the door unlocked and credit cards and cell phones left inside. Reports later surfaced that both Mark and Jacoba were showing signs of deep stress and paranoia, causing them to flee the house. Mitchell seemed to be the only one in the family who didn't care about the perceived danger his family was in. He took his cell phone with him, but when his parents discovered this, they made him throw the cell phone out the window. By Tuesday morning, the Traums had driven nearly 800 kilometers north to a town in New South Wales, where Michael left his parents behind and headed home. The rest of the family continued traveling until Rihanna and Ella followed their brother's example. They stole a car and reported their mother and father missing. Ella and Mitchell became the first members of the Traum family to return home. Rihanna climbed into the trunk of someone else's car, and when the owner of the car found her, she fell into a catatonic stupor and couldn't say her name or where she was. Eventually, the entire family was found, but no one could explain their strange behavior, which police called a mass breakdown. The mysterious disappearance of the St. Paul sailors in 1741 during the Great Northern Expedition, the purpose of which was to find a way to North America and the North Pacific Islands, a group of 15 Russian sailors disappeared without a trace. When on July 17th, the ship St. Paul has reached coast of North America in area of Archipelago Alexander near Alaska. Captain Chirikov sent 10 crew members ashore to find fresh water and a safe anchorage. And in the meantime, to explore the area, the ship could not come close to the shore, so the sailors decided to use a dinghy. After a while, the boat disappeared behind the rocks, and the coast was covered with thick fog, which dissipated only after 6 days. A fire was visible from the ship, and the remaining sailors thought they were being signaled, assuming they could not get back on their own. A second dinghy with 5 crew members went to the rescue. As a result, on July 27th, St. Paul, without waiting for the sailors, was forced to go on a return trip. The mysterious disappearance of sailors caused a lot of speculation. Some experts believe that the boats crashed on the rocks and did not reach the shore. Others that the sailors were attacked by Aborigines. To the surprise of researchers, islands were inhabited by Indians. There is a version according to which the crew members survived and moreover founded a whole settlement in Alaska. In 1774, merchants who traded with the locals of Alaska wrote to the leadership that they saw among the Indians rust-haired, light-skinned people. In any case, even after more than 250 years, disputes about the fate of 15 sailors still do not subside. Subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more to come. All the best to you.